Hi y'all, it's Kay. Welcome back to my channel. Okay, so before we get started, I actually have two really fun things to share with y'all. The first is my Remy backpack came in, and look how cute. It has all the Ratatouille stuff and characters, and it is absolutely adorable. And the zipper's even Remy. I really wish Disney was open so I could go take it around, but alas, I am here. And fun thing number two is I rearranged my bookshelf at 1 a.m. No, it's actually kind of funny. So it's bothered me for a while that my bookshelf is super miscellaneous and everything's just kind of thrown places and it's not really like themed or anything. So for some reason this morning at 1 a.m. this really bothered me. So I woke up and decided to rearrange them. And then I low-key broke my shelf. No, not really. It just like I couldn't get it back on the hinge or whatever they're called. So at 6, so I had to stop, went to sleep. Then at 6, my mom came in and helped me fix it. And now I'm quite happy with it, but it's kind of sad because I did my first video on my bookshelf tour and now it's completely different. So I guess later in the year I have to do another one, so stay tuned for that. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. So today's video is about my March wrap-ups and my April to-be-reads. And yes, I'm aware it's the middle of April and a little late to be doing both of these, but I wanted to do this to give you guys an insight on my book taste and what I've been reading recently. So let's jump on in. So first on our list of books I finished in March is A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmerer. Now, this is the second book in the Curse Breaker series. It's the sequel to A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which was one of my favorite books of 2019 because the writing was so amazing and the characters were so developed and it had such a unique friendship between Harper and Gray and I just fell in love with it. Plus it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, so that's my favorite thing ever. So the things I liked about this book, well, I have to start with Gray. So this book is Gray-centric while the last book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, was Harper and Wren-centric. So I fell in love with Gray in the last book, and this one just made me love him even more than I already did. He's like one of my newest fictional husbands. I love Gray. So Gray is loyal to a fault, but it is also his best quality. He would go to the ends of the earth for people he loves and his friends, and it's honestly what keeps him going throughout this situation he's been put in. And his loyalty also means he is very stubborn, but in a good way. To be completely honest, one of the main reasons I enjoyed this book so much is because of Gray and watching his journey throughout this story. The next thing I absolutely loved about this book was the friendship of Harper and Gray. It's a very unique friendship where Bridget shows how much these two love each other, but it's not romantic at all. And I really enjoyed reading about it, even though they've had like 2 interactions in this entire book. The amount of times Gray defends Harper just makes my heart melt. To experience an amazing friendship story, you have to read this. And the last thing I absolutely loved about A Heart So Fierce and Broken is the story behind what true strength is. This whole story really focuses on one of the main characters. Her name is Leah Mara, and she is not your typical princess that you read about in books nowadays. She's not the strongest, she's not even next in line, but she's really kind and really clever. And the story really shows how kindness is a strength, especially in royalty. And it was just, honestly, I enjoyed it. To me, it was a breath of fresh air to the normal fighting gets you everywhere that's normally in fantasy stories. So yeah. The other thing I absolutely loved about how Leah Mara was written is that she didn't compromise who she was in order to achieve her goals. So normally in like a lot of fantasy books nowadays, you read about how the main character has to sacrifice something they hold dear about themselves in order to save their people or save their friends. And Leah Mara definitely wanted to do that, but I'm not going to spoil, but she achieved what she wanted to do without compromising who she was. And honestly, I absolutely love that about this story. So at the end of this, I ended up giving this amazing book a 5 on Goodreads, which I normally don't do. I think I have about 10 books in total that have 5 stars, but I fell in love with this story and I am anxiously anticipating the next book in this series. And the next book I finished in March was Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Now, this book has been on my anticipated reads list since it was announced almost 3 years ago. Anyway, I loved Chain of Gold. The plot I'm honestly iffy on, like, I don't know how I feel about it yet. I probably know when Chain of Iron comes out. But the characters I absolutely loved. The characters are honestly what made Chain of Gold as good as it was, in my opinion. So I wasn't obsessed with the same characters as everyone else seems to be obsessed with. Like, I loved Cordelia, but I wasn't as obsessed with her, and I've seen a lot of people that loved Alastair, but honestly the people that made this book so amazing for me were Lucy Herondale and Matthew Fairchild. They brought this book to a whole new level. So Matthew seems to be the fan favorite of this franchise, and I do not disagree. He is an amazingly written character. So I loved reading about how he's handling his past mistakes, his great sin from the Ghost of the Shadowhunter market, and I'm really hoping to watch his character development throughout the course of this trilogy. And then he's also, while dealing with all that, so caring and compassionate towards his friends. I just want Matthew to be happy so badly. And it's so weird because normally when that happens, I ship whoever comes along. But this is like the first story I don't ship that. Like, I don't ship him with Cordelia. I don't. Her and James are endgame for me. But I really want Matthew to be happy. So I really hope throughout this series, Cassandra Clare gives him a happiness arc and lets him just, you know, be a young adult without the weight of his sin over him. And speaking of happy endings, the ending of this book honestly made me lose sleep. This is one of the first books in almost a year that has left me feeling completely drained and empty at the end of it. Like, I had to just put the book down and process it for literally the rest of the day. My family was like, what's wrong with you? Also, and before we wrap this book up, I just want to say Lucy Herondale is the most powerful Herondale. I mean, anyone who has read this book and has seen what her powers are, how can you not agree? She is going to be the most powerful character in this series. So, at the end of this, my rating on this book was a 4 on Goodreads. I absolutely love the characters, and I had a really fun time reading this book. However, as mentioned before, I'm not sure how I feel about the plot yet, and it doesn't have the next levelness to it that I would give a 5-star book. That said though, I do recommend this book if you want to jump back into the Shadowhunter world, or even if you want to start reading about the Shadowhunter world. I say this is a okay book to start on, although I do recommend Infernal Devices first. And for the last book I started in March is Supernova. Now, this was one of my anticipated reads of the year. I got it for Christmas last year when it came out, and I haven't had a chance to read it until now. I am very excited about this book. So when March ended, I was about halfway through this book, and I ended up finishing it in early April. So I'm going to be talking about this book on my April wrap-up. So if you want to find out how I feel about this, stay tuned. Now moving on to my April to-be-reads. Now, since it's the middle of April, these are not all the books I have read this month. These are the ones I hope to finish before the month ends. So first off, we have Rogue Princess. This is one of my impulse buys actually. I read about it on Goodreads and I saw it was coming out, so I ended up pre-ordering it, and now I am just now getting a chance to read it. So Rogue Princess is a gender-swapped young adult Cinderella retelling in space, and honestly, I stopped there. That was what drew me to this book. I love fairy tale retellings, and this one sounded really cool because not only is it gender-swapped, but again, it's in space, and it gave me kind of strong Lunar Chronicles vibes, and that's one of my favorite series, so I, of course, had to go back to that. So in this book, Princess Delia is having to go into an arranged marriage to help her planet. However, she believes there's a better way to help her failing planet than by marrying a stranger. So she tries to steal one of her family's spaceships in order to go to a planet and try to secure an alliance. Meanwhile, Aiden is one of the lower class. He's a servant in the palace that her family owns, and he stole something, I think it's a dagger, and he's trying to get away from his step family, who he does not like at all. and they end up stealing the same spaceship. And that is how the book begins, and I'm about halfway through this right now, and I was a little iffy at first about it because it started like kind of all over the place, but as I've kept going, it has actually gotten really good, and I'm very excited to continue reading this, and hopefully I will finish it before April ends. It's kind of short though. See, I'm halfway through it, and I think I'll be able to finish it, so I'm excited to see how this ends. So the next book on my April to be read list is The Shadows Between Us. So this is about a girl who goes to marry the Shadow King, who is a powerful new ruler of her land. And she wants to kill him. However, along the way she ends up falling for him and does everything in her power to protect him. So this is a villain-villain romance, which I really am excited to read. I have heard a lot of mixed reviews on this. A lot of people did not like it as much as they thought they would. So that's kind of lowered my expectations of it. Regardless, I'm still excited to read it. And the last book on my April to be read is The Beautiful. So this takes place in 1800s New Orleans with the main character Celine. Ends up being murders going on, and she has to go to like the underworld of the city where she meets this guy that she starts to like. And then she soon comes to the conclusion that he might be the serial killer. So she has to try to figure all that out in the midst of all this. It kind of gave me Stalking Jack the Ripper vibes, kind of. Same time period, same kind of situation. But I've heard it's very good, so I'm very excited to read it. So that wraps up today's video. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you want, leave in the comments which book you saw today looked and sounded the most interesting. And stay tuned for my next video. Until then, I'm Kay.